Congress was a very, very important step forward in bringing about change in Eritrea. It's important that we see change in Eritrea from Ethiopia's point of view. As you can imagine, Ethiopia feels surrounded by regimes which are, or lack of regimes, which create problems for it. We have obviously our greatest problem in the current regime in Eritrea, and it represents really the greatest threat to stability and peace in the region. It represents a threat to stability and peace because not only does that regime want to see change in Ethiopia and is supporting opposition and armed movements within Ethiopia itself, but of course it's mobilising support for terrorism in Somalia and in Sudan itself, and that really, and of course it's creating instability in Djibouti. It's amazing what that regime is managing to try and think it can do in the Horn of Africa, but it certainly is creating a problem, and it's very important from our point of view in Ethiopia that we see change happen there. It really is the greatest threat to stability and peace in the Horn of Africa. I keep reflecting on what drives the regime in Eritrea. And I think it's a chauvinism which drives it. It's a belief which is dominated by one person, that this person should control the whole region. Back in the mid-80s, when I must admit I was involved in support for the EPLF and the early changes in Eritrea, and I worked with Community Aid Abroad. We mobilised Australian government support for food aid programs for the EPLF. But very clearly and very quickly I realised that change in Eritrea at that time was not going to be enough, that in fact we had to see change within Ethiopia itself and change of the regime under Mengistu Haile-Mariam. And so I turned some of my attention to support for the EPLF. And I was absolutely shocked at the minute the EPLF found out that I supported change in Ethiopia through the TPLF. They cut off communication with me. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand why, at the time, it didn't make any sense that both these regimes should be supported together in seeking change in the Horn of Africa. But it was a signal for me that there was something wrong within the movement, the EPLF at the time. Of course, in 1985-86, that regime in Western Eritrea chose to cut off the food supplies going into Tigray. A most extraordinary act on the part of a movement to try and starve out an opposition movement which thought itself to be a brotherly movement in Ethiopia, and of course caused a major turnabout in the strategy of the TPLF in the way it had to work and had to try to support the people of northern Ethiopia without any assistance from the movement in Eritrea at the time. Of course, we know there was a lot of conflict at that time between the TPLF and the EPLF over a whole range of strategies. One was a conflict over military strategy, as you may be aware. The EPLF had this idea that you build a trench, the Great Natfa Trench, you consolidate there and you move forward inch by inch, the TPLF had a different view. It had a view that you mobilise community support and you create a mobile liberation movement that's not located in any one place particularly, but keeps moving and moving and moving, and eventually takes control of the whole region by gradual garnishing of community support for its work. And I think that again highlights the difference that we see these days between what has become the regime, the so-called recognised regime in Eritrea, and what we see in Ethiopia. It certainly made me very suspicious of Isaiah Afwerki, and I got very, very, very upset when his door was shut and I wasn't able to get through to talk to him any longer. And in fact, Community Aid Board chose in the end to cut off its support because it just became impossible to support a holistic approach to change in the Horn of Africa. What drives this man? We know that he said things like, I believe that Eritrea will become the Singapore of Africa, and the main role of Ethiopia is to be the hinterland of Eritrea, to provide food for us, a hinterland of agriculture. Very strange view to take. A view which he believes that he clearly has a dominant position in the whole of the Horn of Africa, and it just doesn't make sense. It's one thing, I think, to have a vision about what your country will be, and it's good to have a vision about what your country will be and what your hopes for the country are. But it's another thing to have that vision within the context of cooperation with neighbours and working together in a way in which we all move forward, not just one of us to the detriment of others. What hope have we got for change in Eritrea? Quite frankly, I think there's enormous amount of hope on a range of levels. If we look at movements in Africa which have been so dominated by one person, as we have in Eritrea today, we look at a movement like UNITA in Angola, totally and utterly dominated and controlled by one man, Jonas Savimbi. It caused so much destruction in that region, that movement, UNITA. The minute Savimbi was gone, not one more shot was fired in Angola. Literally overnight, that resistance crumbled. We could go back to look at the lessons of the Second World War and think about the role that Hitler played in Germany. Again, the domination that one person has over a nation. And the one minute that person's gone, the next minute we see change for peace. How we bring about that particular bit of change, it's not my job. I have my own views about it. I won't express them here.